Right. Okay, well, Stephen's author of the book on 2025, and he's managed to comb through everything Alice A. Bailey has penned and found everything possible on that date that she wrote, and he might have come up with something else besides that by now, who knows. So anyway, I'll turn it over to you, Stephen, to talk about that year, which is apparently going to be an interesting year.
Right, thank you. I don't have any slides, as Brother Murray had. Very professional, Murray. Thanks. so I'm going to put this down as a sort of a sharing rather than a presentation.
Yeah, don't feel bad. Nobody else had slides. He's the only one.
No. Thanks, Murray. Yes. So 2025, and why I have been talking about it for several decades now. It's something that DK mentions substantially in his books, but actually very few people have actually picked up on and commented on. The last few years, people have been talking about it a bit more, partly because the book may be, but also because some of my friends and colleagues and co-workers have begun to talk about it. Philip Lindsay and people like that have begun to mention it the last 2 or 3 years. In fact, he's done a very good compilation on 2025. You might want to check out on his site, Esoteric Astrologer. And as we're getting so near, especially the interregnum between 2020 and 2025, I think it's really important to understand what DK was talking about and why it's so important. Because all of the issues that we've got now, COVID, political, fires, and all of that stuff, all linked to 2025, or certainly the period between now and 2025. And we should ask ourselves, why did DK mention it so much? I mean, he wrote these things back in the 20s and 30s, in the 40s. Why would he talk about 2025 and keep bringing it up? In fact, DK mentioned it 15 times in his books, in different books. And people tend to just read it and forget about it. But I think it's the most important date of our lifetimes, in fact. Why do I think that? Well, every 100 years, to state the obvious, I know you all know this, but every 100 years, the hierarchy holds a conclave or a gathering of all the hierarchy members in one place. And it only happens once every 100 years, this conclave. And what does it do? DK says the conclave decides for the future 100 years ahead what the plan of the hierarchy is. So that sounds pretty important, doesn't it? And DK's books trace back this conclave, if you look for it, going back to 1425. He doesn't have a chapter called 2025 where he puts all the information in one place. You actually have to go out and look for it, which I did. And he mentions every conclave from 1425. Every single one is mentioned. And we should ask why that is the case. I mean, 1425, he talks a little bit about the conclave. And this is what he says. I've written down a few quotes for you. He says, "This great invocation has been used by the hierarchy ever since the year 1425, though it is thousands of years older than that. Owing, however, to the unreadiness of humanity to cooperate in its use, the results have been delayed and are regarded as hovering." He uses that word, hovering. What does that mean? Interesting, huh? But he does mention the first well, not the first conclave, but certainly the first significant conclave, which is in 1425. And he mentions that in the book, The Externalization of the Hierarchy, page 158, if you're interested in looking it up. And so the Shambhala impact towards 2025 started in 1425 at that date. He then goes on to say, when this Shambhalic energy impacted our earth, after 1825, much evil was aroused and was burned for the greater, longer good. This was needed to ensure the externalization and reappearance of the world teacher was unimpeded. Same book, page 678. DK goes on to talk about the externalization of the hierarchy starting at 2025. Now, many people in our genre claim the New Age, if you like, or whatever you want to call it, the externalization, started in the 1960s. Some people say it started in the 1800s. But DK is quite clear about this. Technically, it starts 2025. That's what he says in the books. It's quite clear. And so I would say in all probability, it is that the years before that were pre-externalization, if you like, or building up to the externalization of the hierarchy, but not the actual externalization. So the most important conclave next to the next one, which is in 4 years' time, was of course 1925. And I think it's worth looking back to 1925 to find out what happened, what significantly took place to further focus that year, the 100-year conclave is important to us. Now, a couple of quotes again from DK. Senior disciples in the major ashrams are now beginning to form subsidiary ashrams, as I began to do in the year 1925, he says. So that's very significant. To this end, the masters put their personal groups of disciples in touch with each other, subjectively, intuitively, and sometimes telepathically. Thus, the new group of world servers came into being. What can we deduce from that? In my opinion, the new group of world servers were formed in 1925. And if that's the case, what can we look forward to in 2025? And we can discuss that a little bit later, because we don't really know technically, but we can discuss what might happen in 2025. What else happened in 1925? Treatise on Cosmic Fire was published in 1925. And of course, that is the second psychological key to the secret doctrine that Dwalkol talked about. And it was published in 1925. The other very large and huge event that took place was regarding Krishnamurti, who in 1929, only 4 years after 1925, disbanded the Order of the Star. And I think it's worth, for a few minutes, just talking that over, because that is linked very, very closely to 2025. And it's something, again, which people don't often consider. Krishnamurti originally was chosen to be the physical vehicle of Christ, or the next world teacher. And that was decided at the previous conclave in 1825. And then, of course, Blavatsky came along 1875 and started the Theosophical Society, etc., etc. There were some issues with the Order of the Star and Krishnamurti, which led the Christ to take the momentous decision, as outlined in the books by Dwalkol, to return himself, not, we can talk about what that means, but physically reappear. Some people say return, reappear, whatever. But because he's had his Maya Vayupa here on the earth, technically it's a reappearance, not a return, because he just energizes that and uses it again. And Krishna, when he started to withdraw the energy from Krishnamurti, Krishnamurti went through all sorts of healing crises and things like that, which have been well documented in various books by people around him. Mary Lutyens did a...
Is there a good biography on him that details this information?
Yes, there is. There's a very good one called Star in the East. I can't remember the author straight off the top of my head, but Star in the East is a very good book. And also I recommend Mary Lutyens' book, Candles in the Sun. That's another very good biography.
Okay, I have to check that out.
Yeah. If you just bear with me, I'll see if I can find the book.
I've never read a biography on him. I read details about him and some of his writings, but
let's see if I can...
I'm no expert on him.
Star in the East.
Oh, okay.
Is a very good book.
Okay. Keep that, I'll write that down.
Yeah. I mean, Star in the East doesn't go into the detail that I've gone into. I mean, I have got a paper on BBR, which I've outlined my theory on Krishnamurti. But my working hypothesis is that the Christ, the world teacher, withdrew his energy, and in 1929, Krishnamurti disbanded the Order of the Star and famously said, "Truth is a pathless land." You all know that saying. And he carried on his work as a sort of world teacher, strangely enough, but not in the theosophical traditions that we all know and love. What does that mean? Well, DK then wrote in the 30s and 40s about the reappearance of the Christ, which is a direct result of that event, in my opinion. You can make up your own minds by reading the books and reading the paper. And so I think most of us accept that the world teacher, AKA Christ, Maitreya, etc., will make his reappearance sometime after 2025. But the final decision on when that will be is going to be taken at Wesak 2025. And all of this is supported by the information in the Alice Bailey books, because it's mentioned 15 times. He doesn't mention 2020, he doesn't mention 2030, he mentions 2025. And we're only 4 years away. And so I see it as part of my dharma to try to make that more widely known. The other thing worth mentioning in 1925 was the work of Helena Roerich and Nicholas Roerich, and the writing of the Agni Yoga books. The first book, Leaves of Moira's Garden, is dated in 1924, 1 year before. And that first book was written by Nicholas Roerich, not by Helena Roerich. I don't know if many of you know that. What the first book ever written with the Master Moria was written by Nicholas Roerich, not by his wife. And then the second volume of Leaves of Moira's Garden was published in 1925. And so you can see the link that I'm making there, 1924. I think we'll forgive them for being a year early. So 1925 again started the Agni Yoga books, and then they produced the whole sets after that. So Krishnamurti and Agni Yoga, the decision of the world teacher to reappear physically, all linked to 2025, which is only 4 years away. And that is all linked to the catastrophes that are happening in our world today, from COVID to all the other stuff that's going on. So before we get into what could happen in 2025, does anybody want to ask any questions around what I've said so far?
So do you think by 2025, we're going to have all kinds of false spiritualists claiming to represent the hierarchy showing up?
Well, if I mean, that's already happened, of course, you know, many times.
Regularly, but I anticipate there's going to be even more than ever right about that day.
I think that's correct, but I think the only caveat I would say, I think that's absolutely correct. The only caveat I would say is that most people don't know about the significance of the date. It's not widely. It's not widely known. I mean, even in our genre, the theosophical genre, should we call it, spiritual genre, people aren't really talking about it that much, and so it's beginning to build up. And of course, as we build up towards 2025, next year, 2021, 2022, I mean, things will start to heat up. I mean, my book is selling better now than it was before, and blah blah blah. People will start to learn about it. I'm expecting other publications to come out and to start to discuss it as well. But for people to be able to claim that they are the world teacher in 2020, they'd have to know about the date. So that's the only thing. But I think the energy-wise, yes, I think many people will start to claim that they have connections either with the world teacher, you know, Cream style, or with masters.
Yeah, I think it's going to take a lot of discernment when we reach that day to figure out who's for real and who isn't.
Well, yeah. I mean, DK has made it clear that he's not going to be giving out any teachings until after 2025. I mean, he says that in the books. I mean, he said it's clear. I mean, it's clear. I mean, you know, he said there will be no more. I will give no more dictation, he said, until around 2025. That's what he said. And people still claimed that they were in contact with him, even though he said he wasn't going to do it. Yeah. So, but yes, you are going to get some increase in that as it becomes more popularly known. 2025. I mean, people always latch on to things like that, and I think you know, one of my things that I've said on BBR quite often is I think some people genuinely connect to the energy of a master's ashram. I think it does happen. You know, I mean, people do. Obviously, you know, people evolve and they start to work and they do have connections. But the problem is that they extrapolate the connection into being a personal one-to-one, tete-a-tete. That's the problem. You know, I mean, it's so easy to do. I mean, I've done it myself many years ago when I first started out in the 1980s, and I started to work with the ashram energies. You know, there was a time when I felt that I was in direct contact with Kuthumi, for example. I know it sounds absurd now, but it wasn't just me. I mean, people around me thought that too. And it wasn't until after a certain amount of teaching and learning and getting to understand the energies that I learned that it wasn't the case. That I had a connection with one of his disciples. But it's so easy to have a connection and to get some information and then to extrapolate it into having a cup of tea with Kuthumi, you know, and people do that all the time. So I think it's wise we don't just sort of condemn them all as just, you know, being absurd. I think some of it is absurd, but some of it is genuine connection, but simply extrapolation. That is my view.
Something genuine that shows up, so you never know.
Can you share, Stephen? Can you share some of your references? I know you mentioned a couple pages. It was, I think, in Externalization of the Hierarchy, where he talks about 2025.
Yes, probably the easiest thing to do is maybe a little bit later is to write them all down for you. But I know the page numbers I've given you so far, both Externalization of the Hierarchy, page 158 is talking about 1425, and page 678 is talking about 1825. let's see if I've got any others here. Glamour, page 170. Externalization again, page 530. And Dina, page 64. Dina, the Dina page 64 quote is, senior disciples in the major ashrams are now beginning to form subsidiary ashrams, as I began to do in the year 1925. Dina, page 64. That one.
Because my personal belief is that 4 years after this election in this country, there will be a major upheaval. It'd be 2025. I've thought that for some time. So that interests me that you've done all this research on that date.
Yeah, 2024 election is going to be really important to you.
It'd be very poignant.
Hopefully we'll have one still.
Well, yeah. Yeah, that's right.
So if we have anything to do with it, we will.
Well, it's you know, Curtis, it's in the hands of humanity. DK talked about this a lot. He talked about it's the evocation of humanity which will enable the world teacher to reappear. It's humanity's got to do the work. And the reason that we're having problems now, from my observation, is because we have not developed the way that DK had thought we would do. I mean, DK, back in the 20s and 30s, he said there was, I think it was 156 initiates in the world he talked about. And he talked about, of those 156 initiates, I can't remember exactly the figure, he said there's like something like 60 or 70 who are useful to him. But then he went on to say that by 2025, there will be millions of them. Now, he was predicting that if humanity followed the trajectory that was decided in 1925, then there would be millions of initiates. He also talked about the World Federation running the world. Do you remember that? He talked about that. He said in 2025, the World Federation, of talking politically, will be in place. Well, that hasn't happened, has it? So I think that the hierarchy thought that humanity and wanted that humanity responded in a much more positive way. Now, because of the problems now, there are sections of humanity which are responding completely appropriately. You know, I mean, there's lots more meditation groups going on. There's lots more reaching out. And so there are positive signs within humanity, in my view, that show that we could get together and we could, you know, basically pull ourselves out of the mire. But, and this is purely a personal opinion now, so please don't read anything more into it than that, because I'm only a student as you are. But I believe that only an intervention will save humanity. I don't think humanity are going to respond in enough numbers to get the critical mass necessary to save ourselves. It's purely opinion, but my opinion is observing and reading the history that we simply haven't done it. And therefore an intervention will have to take place post 2025. And what could that intervention be? Well, DK talked about that too, didn't he? He talked about we must do certain things to avoid the destruction of humanity. He said those words. If we don't do three things, we will not avoid the destruction of humanity. Those three things are: 1, a recognition of the world of meaning. 2, a recognition of those who implement world affairs and who engineer those steps which lead mankind towards the destined goal. 3, a steadily increased recognition of the plan on the part of the masses. Esoteric Psychology, Volume 1. He goes on to say, the inner structure of the World Federation of Nations will eventually be equally well organized and its outer form rapidly taking place by 2025. Well, it better get going pretty quick, hadn't it? We've only got 4 years to go. There is no sign of a World Federation of Nations. There isn't. I mean, United Nations we have, but it's completely inept, isn't it? But those three, going back to those three recognitions, I raise them because they are linked integrally to 2025. A recognition of the world of meaning, right? What does that mean? Has anybody got any thoughts on that? A recognition of the world of meaning. DK talks a lot about the world of meaning in his books.
Yeah, he does. Basically, it's understanding why things happen the way they do, I guess. Something to that effect.
Well,
Right.
it's the world of the soul.
The soul. Yeah. Yes. The world of meaning. So what I think he's suggesting also is that we're living in a world of illusion and delusion. That's my understanding of it, and that we have to recognize the meaning behind everything.
What's the meaning of what appears to be,
Yes, exactly, Edward. That's what it is.
and what
It's the
really
meaning.
is? What really is?
That's right. That's exactly what it is. The world of meaning, everything. I mean, people talk about political stuff. They talk about COVID. They talk about all these, but all these are all effects. They're not meanings. They're all effects of inner energy, everything. And humanity needs to understand that, is my understanding of what DK is teaching there. It's not enough to say, oh, well, you know, we feel sorry for koala bears because they're getting burnt in Australia. Yeah, of course we do. You know, nobody wants to see fires and earthquakes and political upheavals and revolutions and mad cow disease, bird flu disease, dengue, you know, which is nothing new, is it? This COVID thing, let's be honest. I mean, now we've got the COVID. Next year it'll be something else. And the nature, the world is trying to teach us something about the world of meaning. You know, don't abuse the world, don't abuse animals, don't abuse humans, you know, and all of those things that I know every single person on here believes in and believes to be true. And only by tackling the world of meaning and understanding the substance behind the illusion can we move forward. And DK was saying here that if we don't do that, as one of the three recognitions, we cannot avoid the destruction of humanity. The second one then, a recognition of those who implement world affairs and who engineer those steps which lead mankind onward toward its destined goal. So he's talking about the externalization of the hierarchy there, in my opinion. Any other opinions on what that means? The second recognition. It's difficult, isn't it? But I mean, I think he's talking about the hierarchy that stands behind governments, you know? And this is important because we look at world leaders and we say, oh, this person, you know, particularly in America, particularly at the moment, you know, this person's this person's that, but that nobody's understanding that politicians have a role too. And they are what we put there. You know, it's not just, and that's not just a democratic thing. That is an energy thing. It's the effect of the way that the world is, the leaders it gets. You could say the leaders it deserves. Some people might say. And so it's not so easy just to look at something and just say, well, we don't like Republicans, we're Democrats. That's inane, in my opinion, because actually the forces of the hierarchy and the forces of evolution work through everybody, every political party and every religion and every thought process.
Yes,
There
precisely. Yeah, precisely, Steve. I think it's not just political leaders, it's leaders everywhere, in financial areas, in culture, in science, and everywhere, because the last events in a couple of years the financial crisis and all that. And we have leaders that have been promoted, even the corporate level, where they identify the problem, but they duck under the table. They just hide, and you find that everywhere. They don't have the courage to do that. So recognition of the leader, I think, is some sort of precipitation of these people from everywhere that eventually will form the new group of world servers. That's my own personal opinion.
I think that's right, Terry. And I think that you picked up on it perfectly, that the energy comes first and the effect comes second. And it happens, as you pointed out so well, in every field in the world. This is why, and people who know me well know that I have an issue with people always talking about some political party or some political person or whatever. I don't like any of that, only because I only see it as an effect. And all of the leaders who might appear completely destructive and are destructive are still part of the world karmic events going towards 2025, getting back onto that. And my observation is that all of those energies working through the world, and at the moment, a lot of them destructively, because we haven't realized the three recognitions appropriately, and they're having a destructive effect. So, ergo, what happens in 2025? Is humanity in the next 4 years going to wake up, start to treat animals appropriately, start to harvest appropriately, and right human relations will be everywhere? And therefore, we can evoke the Christ and he will reappear after 2025. Is that a practical idea? I don't think it is. I think there's going to be pockets of that, and you're one of them. This, your group and my group, and there's some other very good groups. And there are pockets, and these pockets of love and energy can make big changes. There's no question about that. But can we change enough by 2025 to evoke the world teacher, as was written in DK's books, who will respond to that evocation and reappear? I think it's probably unlikely. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I think it's more likely that the hierarchy will meet, and I don't speak for them. It's just my observations. I hope I'm wrong on that, and I hope but I suspect that they will meet in 2025 at WESAC and make the decision for the world teacher to reappear. I suspect that's what will happen.
Is this what you see as an intervention, as the coming of the world teacher?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it's either that or destruction of humanity.
How do you think he would go about preventing the destruction if we are headed that direction?
I think it's superhuman, if you like, energy transference. I think the Bible talks about, every eye shall see him and all this sort of stuff. And I think it will be a world event that will happen within the hearts of humanity, actually. I think it will be so enormous that people will just sit there and just, get this burst of energy.
And what's disconcerting is DK warned that we could actually destroy ourselves. So
That's
concerning also, isn't it?
Well, this is what he said. If we don't live by these three recognitions, then we might not avoid destruction. He says that.
Yeah.
He said the words were to avoid the destruction, the total destruction of humanity, is what he said.
But it's funny, in other places he talks real positive, like that's not going to happen at all. And then other times he turns around and gives a stern warning. So it's kind of interesting the way he words things.
Well, he does, and that's an interesting point, because like I mentioned earlier, that in some of his teachings, he says there'll be millions of initiates by now. There'll be a World Federation of Nations by now. People will be talking about healing through electricity and color and sound.
Yeah.
By 20. And that hasn't happened. I mean, it's starting to happen, but please don't misunderstand me. I'm just saying that a fifth degree initiate can't know everything and can't predict everything to 100% because humanity has free will. And DK says that all the way through the books. He says, I'm saying all this, but I can't interfere with the free will of human beings. And he can't.
I think what's happened is he was just a little too optimistic on human, and we're behind schedule, but hopefully we can catch up.
Well, he was optimistic about several things. I mean, there's certain things like the Dina groups. I mean, he was optimistic that those people in those groups, through his personal teachings, would form an outer ashram on the physical plane for the hierarchy. And it didn't happen, did it? It didn't work.
Had a handful that worked out to any degree.
I mean, yeah, well, some of it worked and some of it didn't. Some people left, some people were kicked out. And unfortunately, it didn't do what he thought it could do, and it had the potential to do it. And I think that's what he talks about, the potential. The potential in humanity is for millions of people to evoke Christ's reappearance. Of course, the potential's there, but you know, people have a choice, don't they? I mean, people have a choice now. I mean, you've got all sorts of problems in your country. You know, I mean, people on the streets fighting. You know, you have a choice. You know, Gandhi had a choice. You know, his choice was not to fight, not to battle, but to sit down and to peacefully demonstrate in masses and millions to get the freedom of India, you know, and he did it the right way, in my view, you know, but people have a choice. They can go out and smash windows and loot, or they can meditate and they can peacefully protest. And then people have their own personal choice. It's their own self-responsibility. It's nobody else's responsibility, how you act, you know. It's not because something happened on the streets to somebody else and you've got to go out and hurt people. No, you have a choice, you know. Anyway, so that was the second recognition. And the third one is a steadily increased recognition of the plan on the part of the masses. And he was talking there about, obviously, people understanding about the externalization process and have a recognition. That's the key word. And again, that hasn't happened yet. It hasn't. I mean, we can't. If I go out in the street today and I say to 10 people, what do you think about the externalization? They're going to wonder what on earth I'm talking about, aren't they?
And part of the plan was goodwill. I gave a talk on that was this morning, and we're behind schedule on promoting that also. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was what I was just referring to a minute ago, wasn't it? Goodwill. People have the choice, you know. I mean, goodwill is is the sort of lowest form of love DK talks about, but it's the one thing that all humans can understand. You know, it's only through love that we're ever going to change this planet. Not emotional love, but in the intuitive love. You know, we just can't do it otherwise. It's impossible. And there are groups like yours, like mine, and like there's several others who are trying to ground the light, if you like, without sounding too new agey, to ground the light onto the earth plane. Because I think that everybody in your group, and my group, and several other do understand about the masters and the externalization and all that jazz. And so by understanding that, we can impart love and wisdom to other people through group work, mostly through group work. So I've got.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Rick, go on.
I was going to say, I've been getting my own personal observations that the crowds of people in the world are ready to move upward, and you know, that if only we could get rid of all these bureaucrats that nobody elected in the first place. We want to get to the point where we have love for everybody in the world.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Well, it's in the hand. I mean, we get what, as like I said before, we get what we deserve to a certain extent, Rick, you see, because the world, people have not risen up against these bureaucrats, have they? They've not. They're starting to now, but they haven't really got their act together. And so 2025 is nearly upon us. We've only got 4 years left. So let me read another couple of DK quotes. Glamour, page 170. I have made this practical application and the immediate illustration of the teaching, and then glamour, illusion, and maya, because the whole world problem has reached a crisis today, and because its clarification will be the outstanding theme of all progress, educational, religious, and economic, until 2025, is what he says. And I'm running out of time, so I'll just do one more. Thus, a great and new movement is proceeding, he says, and a tremendously increased interplay and interaction is taking place. This will go on until 2025. During the years intervening between now and then, very great changes will be seen taking place. We all know about that, right? And at the great General Assembly of the Hierarchy, held as usual every century in 2025, the date in all probability will be set for the first stage of the externalization of the hierarchy. That's in the book, Externalization of the Hierarchy, page 530. So what can we expect in 2025? I think that it's beholden to all groups to sort of make that year a very special year, to work towards it, and to help build the Antakarana of Christ, and to open ourselves up to be prepared for whatever happens between then and now, because there's going to be more cataclysm, there's going to be more issues, there's going to be political upheavals, there's going to be viruses, there's going to be all sorts of earth changes and all sorts of stuff happening. Who knows what's coming, but it's coming, you know. And really, what is it? It's a wake-up call, right? It's, you know, we've tried to talk to you, we've sent the signs, we've done the stuff, but you've not woken up to it. So here's a wake-up call. Bang, bang. Are you awake yet? Bang, bang. That's the problem. And that's going to be through all those channels that Terry talked about, with cultural, political, religious, on all levels, health, environment, the whole shebang, you know. And 2025 at Wesak, on the 12th of May in 2025, the hierarchy will meet and they will make the final decision on the next 100 years until 2125. What does that mean? It means that the personnel in the hierarchy that DK talked about will change. It changed in 1925. It changed before that. DK talks about KH taking on the mantle of the world teacher, and DK will take on the mantle of KH. It's all in the books. And that is going to be post 2025. I'm not suggesting on the day. I mean, I would be most surprised if suddenly on the 12th of May, all the TV screens went blank and the beautiful light flowed out the TV screens, and we all became sort of enlightened, so to speak. I don't think that's going to happen. There is an interregnum. There is a time before 2025 when we go through the birth pangs, and there's a time after 2025, probably up to 50 years, I would have thought, maybe more, when the externalization is rolled out. When we see the world teacher himself, I don't know. I just don't know. I mean, there is a possibility it could be 2025. I mean, but it's more likely to be after that, I would have thought. I doubt I'll be here, and I doubt many of you will be here, but that's just thinking. I don't know. So I see I'm coming up to 59 minutes and 45 seconds. So
Oh, don't worry about time. We're not black and white on that.
Yes,
Okay.
Stephen,
Hi.
I just wanted to say, you know, I'm inclined to agree with you to some degree, but I have, as much as I'd like to be a mystical occultist, I'm more of an occult mystic, and so I can't not hold out hope. And as ominous an opportunity as the COVID-19 is, for example, I mean, when in your lifetime have you watched advertisements on television that say we're all in this together? You know, when have you seen, when it happens all the time because of the planet slowing down, energetic changes occurring so that Mother Nature's able to normalize a little bit. And an incident occurs and there's not response in just this country, but worldwide. You know, so as much as it doesn't look ideal, you know, I just to some degree have to hold out hope that there's going to be enough conscious change. DK talked about, in telepathy and a bunch of the other books about, how that would manifest in the future. And really what we're doing right now is like a forerunner of direct telepathic rapport. The internet was created so that, I have been on 3 different webinars today with from 20 to 200 people all across the world focusing on manifesting exactly these things we're talking about. And 30 years ago, that didn't happen. So there has been some progress, and hopefully the hierarchy will deem that there's enough of us that are making the effort that it's necessary now for the Christ to reappear in order to really be able to solidify the changes that humanity needs to take.
Yes, I think that several thoughts. I understand completely why you say that, and there has been some progress, but I think we should retain relativity here. There's 7 billion people on the planet, 7 billion, and you're right. There are groups out there in their hundreds who have hundreds of people, but what is the critical mass required to make the changes? Really in the West, we have much more going on that you've just described. I don't know how much is going on in China or Russia or those other countries, but very, very little. I have some friends in Russia who are involved in our genre, right? And how many hundreds of millions of people live in Russia? And there's probably about 30 or 40 in the groups. I hate to be depressing, but there's not many,
Right.
And
One of the things I feel strongly about is that we got to reach beyond the esoteric groups out to the common man and eventually influence him. Like DK said, he was hoping by 1975 we would be on the radio all over the place with esoteric philosophy, and that didn't happen. And so I think we need, the esoteric groups need to reach out beyond themselves a lot more than they've done in the past. That's one of my opinions there, but go ahead.
No, I think that's absolutely right. The changes won't happen just within the esoteric groups. That'd be madness to assume that. But the esoteric groups, from the hierarchical point of view, are the leaders of this spiritual change, which all of humanity must demonstrate. Obviously, as you've just described, because DK talked about externalizing ashrams on the physical plane, and there's no doubt that your group, my group, and other groups are part of that externalization. We are part of the externalization. And for the energy of the ashram to come via Shambhala down to humanity, it has to go through human beings. And the more human beings who are engaged in group work and in grounding hierarchical energies and distributing hierarchical energies, those energies will then impact upon humanity. It actually doesn't take billions of people to change things, but it does take... Sorry?
No, I said you're right, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't take billions of people, but it does take, many more than I think that we have now. And that's why, and I sincerely hope I'm wrong, and that we make it by ourselves,
Yeah. I agree with you too, and that's why it's like whenever I do my sacred sound ceremonies, I don't expect people that come and participate to have, be steeped in the Bailey Blavatsky or Rorich teachings. However, I will always end my sound healing ceremonies with the Great Invocation.
Yes.
So that there's some exposure, but I'm trying to hold that quality of energy, whether they have the understanding or not, and put it out there for people.
Yes.
Well, don't you think there's enough world tension going on right now to stimulate the consciousness, to raise the consciousness, to get people to think and to move in a positive direction that will form enough groups that humanity can save itself?
Well, that's what's going on, isn't it? I mean, the reason we've got these problems, Curtis, is that the energy of the world is pushing us to do exactly what you're describing. That the important point is about the world of meaning, isn't it? Is that the world karma, the national karma, world karma, our own individual karma, group karma, all of that stuff, is magnetically and energetically pushing us to do what we should be doing, which is exactly what you're describing. This is the whole point. This is the point about the world of meaning, is that we have to understand that the energy is neutral in a way, if you like, and it's there, and it can be used for destructive purposes or purposes of love and understanding. And the more people we get to think about the world of meaning and the three recognitions and the externalization plan and the hierarchy, the more people will be available to ground, if you like, or earth, if you like, that energy, that rarefied energy around us. Because if we don't do that, the energy then becomes a destructive force, as it is at the moment. I mean, there's no doubt about it that the hierarchy and the world karma are begging us to wake up and to see what's happening and to do something about it. And it's been going on for years. And some people have woken up, there's no doubt, but billions haven't, you know? And what's the outcome? I mean, I can only surmise that it's going to be that the world teacher reappears and said, okay, enough's enough. You know, if I don't reappear, it's over. I mean, some scientists are saying it's over already, aren't they? I read a scientist the other day, I can't remember his name, and he was saying that we've gone past the point of no return environmentally, and for extinction of certain species. We can't get it back. You know, that's more than one scientist's view. I can only say that I think that the world teacher will walk again on our earth. And I think that every heart shall know him and every eye shall see him. And it will be an inner energetic soul response. But, you know, and I guess you could say, you know, the end justifies the means in a way. You know, at the end of the day, if the world teacher returns, he returns either when we invoke him or he comes as part of an intervention, I guess. But I think the hierarchy were intending that humanity develop far more than it has, and to build the Antakarana, to have a world federation of nations, not to have nations split up by passports and fighting and all this nonsense going on, spending billions on the arms race and all of that jazz. I think the hierarchy was presuming and hoping and encouraging us to go a different course, and we didn't do it.
Do you think after World War II, they thought maybe the door to evil was shut a little bit more than it was?
Yes, yes. Yes, I think that's right. I think that it wasn't shut.
Yeah. He admitted that it wasn't completely shut, but maybe they were a little bit too optimistic right after the war.
I think they were, because it was a, you know, we must bear in mind that DK as a 5th degree initiate was still like a grain of salt to the great cosmic avatars. You know, I mean, we have to understand that when they talk about perfected masters, they don't mean
not perfect.
No, well, you know what I mean. Perfect in the sense of not dominating. That's the wrong word. Of overcoming emotional, you know, the emotion and all that stuff. So they've done that. So they are perfected masters. But DK himself says he can't foretell all the future. If you look at some of his prophecies, they haven't happened. I mean, look at his own groups I described about 30 minutes ago. Dina didn't work, you know. But one thing that has worked, let's be completely positive. I think triangles is the greatest work ever to come out of DK. I think triangles and the triangle network has saved humanity so far. That's my view, observation. Triangles, I mean, there's not that many of them, but there's a few thousand. But those triangles have earthed the hierarchical energy for many, many years.
You know, it's also possible the internet is more developed than they anticipated, and that could be a positive thing.
Well, it's funny you mention that, because the internet is really a metaphor, isn't it, for the spread of goodwill, isn't it? Because almost everybody has the internet, and if they don't have food sometimes, you know, the internet has spread. I was going to say like a virus, so it's probably not a good choice of words, but you get my point. You know, it's spread throughout humanity, and most people are in some way connected. And an event that happens in Africa is on our screens within 10 minutes. You know, so actually, that's a metaphor for externalization, isn't it? On its lowest level.
Right.
You imagine if we could externalize love like that, as we have the internet.
Yeah. Well, we're seeing right now is just a dream a generation ago.
Yeah, exactly. So we're making huge progress.
I'm greatly encouraged about what I see about the advancement of consciousness in my lifetime, because I was born in 1938, and things weren't anywhere near as they are now. And I've been in these groups since 1969, and I know of, and I've been associated with them all around the world. And I see that we have to focus our attention on the good and that which is really happening, and get beyond the discouragement of the appearances of things.
Steve, may I ask a question?
Yeah.
At this critical juncture in humanity, would selfish service be as effective as selfless service?
Can you define selfish service?
So, well, a service that would be offered for the personality's enhancement, even though it was considered selfless. It may be humanitarian in effort, but the motives may be of a selfish nature for self-aggrandizement, even though it is put forth as aid to humanity, as opposed to one who is totally selfless and coming from that space. Just wondering what you might think.
I think all of us have a mixture of both, actually, don't we? I think it's by degree. I don't think there's many people who are, in my observation, who are black and white. I think all of us sometimes do things for selfish motivation, and sometimes we do things selflessly. But the fact is, what is the energy which is going to level all that out? The leveling energy is karma, and as Buddha taught about, intention is everything. And at the end of the day, our soul evolves through karmic energy, and you cannot fool it. So if your intention is to help for your self-aggrandizement, then that will be repeated in your own karmic ongoing lives, because it's the energy of karma, which is a completely different, huge subject, is dynamic and will respond to love and will respond to the selfishness of the personality. So in some ways, how can we judge? In some ways, some people say Bill Gates is a selfless person, and some people on the internet, I notice, are saying he's almost like Lucifer incarnate. You know, so who is to say what his intention is? Only his soul knows that, and you can't fool it, you can't buy it, and you can't change it. That's it.
It's just what is.
It is what it is. No, that's it.
Is what it is, huh?
Well, I would like to say, Steve, I really appreciate your intelligence and your remarks. I think at the end of the day, like you say, what's really going to change the planet is group consciousness. People working in small groups, triads, groups of 12, however you want to bring people together. But it's going to be the group that will hopefully be overshadowed by the Christ or one of his constituents that would energize these groups to a place where they can make a real positive change in our planet, and we will stand out and have a voice that will make a difference.
I think that's an important point. I think actually the Christ energy, I think, will work through all groups.
Any group is receptive.
Yeah, I think you could be a group of you know, people who are playing chess in somewhere, and they have a minute before they play their chess club for world peace. I think they will be used too. I think the energy is positive from the hierarchy. It will come through any channel you give it, which is why I'm so keen on not being tied down to one particular philosophy or one particular political stance, because I think the energy will come through everybody who opens their heart to it. I mean, Christ is not a Democrat, and Christ is not a Republican. Christ is a world teacher and leader. And he has no interest in secular politics. He's interested in love and goodwill. And whoever responds to that teaching, he will use. Doesn't matter who you are. You know, if you're...
Excuse me, so Steve, should we say that for groups to be effective in this work, do they need to balance their energies in a way that this sort of polarity is dismissed? Because if a group is polarized, I mean, through internally, I mean, some people are talking about Democrats and at the same time looking at balancing the energy to bring about something that is positive. Will that be self-defeating? Should groups, first of all, work towards balancing this energy in a way that they become very effective in promoting both group consciousness that is able to disseminate the education about right to mind relationship? I've been having this conversation with one of my colleagues here in Nigeria, and we don't seem to be agreed, because I completely take your point, and because we are facing the same issues in Nigeria, and everybody can talk about both Christians, Muslims, elites, and ordinary people, as they're saying one thing: we need to come together to save the country. I mean, and that has same parallel with what is happening in the US, and that has same parallel with what is happening in the world. And I have this friend who was talking about China and supporting America. I keep on telling him, look, neither America nor China is evil or good. Both of them are using the same energy, and it's the way the energy is balanced. And therefore, is it important that groups, even if when they talk about group consciousness, should they balance its energy in a way that they minimize this sort of polarization so that they become effective?
It's essential, Terry, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, and I say we talk about this in my own group. When you come to do the group work, please leave behind in a box outside the door all of your own personal issues. That's family, career, your political stance. We all have bias, all of us, every single, unless we're a master, we all have bias, you know? And we ask, as much as can possibly be done, that people set it aside. We're not asking them to lose it. I always say when I do meditations, you can pick it up later when you leave the meditation if you wish, but nobody else wants it. But when you come to do the work, please set it aside, you know, because then when you set it aside, you open the chalice to the hierarchy, don't you? You open to spiritual energy. If you go into a group wanting to push your bias one way or the other, for whatever political party or for whatever church or religion or whatever cultural thing you have, then you are not becoming an open chalice for service for hierarchy. So my observation over working with groups now for over 40 years is setting aside, please set it aside, pick it up later. And then when you do that, you come in as a sort of a negative charge, if you like. I'm not talking about negative energy, I'm talking about a negative charge. You come in ready to receive energy, because the energy from the hierarchy is a positive energy, and the energy of groups is negatively charged to receive that energy into the planet. And so it's really important to do as you describe, and to set aside all that and become a balanced group. And that's what DK talked about in Dina, and he begged some of the people there, please leave that aside, you know, please do this or do that. And some did it and some didn't. And future group work is going to be like that. You know, it's a bit like a doctor doing an operation. You know, I mean, you don't want if you've got an operation on your heart, you don't want the doctor to be thinking about his shopping or thinking about who he's going to vote for on next election, do you? You want him focused exactly on your position laying on the table. And that's how groups should be, ideally, is that you're focusing on service work. And then you get the balance between the people in the group. In our group, it's 12 people. And you get that balance there. And in triangles, you get the balance of the 3 people. And that is the goal of all groups, I would suggest. And that is directly from the teachings in the Blue Books. Yeah.
Okay, well, we really appreciate it. That's a good place to end right there on that note, I think.
Okay,
And,
thank you for inviting me.
yeah, we really appreciate it. You've done a terrific job. And everybody give him a hand. You can't hear the hand, but
Yeah, we want to see you again, Steve.
Thank you. Bless you all.
Yay.
You can hear us.
Bless you all. And let's just all get together and look to the light.
yeah, we'll have to look for ways to cooperate more.
Yeah, we should. We should. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Stephen.
Namaste.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank
Namaste.
you.
Namaste. Namaste.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Nomi Horenge Kyo.